Forward, they cannot stop us now. Only hope to contain us. Let them try and knock us down. Onward, they'll never stop us now. So they hope to contain us. Let them try and knock us down. This is hallway memory flashback. We watch some sugar coat.
Hey everybody, this is Sam from Out of the Armchair Podcast. Hope you all had a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and happy whatever doesn't insult you. I know we did. We had a pretty good holiday. Went and seen the in-laws, and of course we went over to my family's house afterwards and had a pretty good time. Good food, great family, big love. I'm just shooting this short promo today because I want to talk about. We have three episodes over 5 days. I think we're getting ready to record, and some of them will be live. So I want to give you a heads up what to look forward to. But before we get started, let's, if you like what you see here today, click that subscribe button down there on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Or you can find us on Facebook at Out of the Armchair Podcast, on Instagram, Out of the Armchair Podcast, all one word, and on Twitter of Armchair. So go ahead and go find us over there, like us, follow us, tweet us, retweet us, stay up to date with our conversations. So Saturday, I'm going to have a special guest, and I can't tell you who it is because what's happening is he's actually chosen our podcast to come on and announce his candidacy for public office. Which is real exciting for us. Just the fact that he chose our podcast. We like to dabble in politics and philosophy a lot, so I think it goes hand in hand. And what our long form conversation podcast does allow for him to do is unpack a lot of the ideas that he has for his seat in public office. Well-educated guy. We've been friends for quite a while on social media and stuff. I like a lot of his ideas. And I'm thinking he may be a great candidate for this. I guess I'll leave that up to you to decide after the interview. Another exciting one that I'm doing with is an exit interview on December 31st. And this time we'll be doing a morning and coffee interview. So I'm doing an exit interview with now seated Sheriff Brad Rogers of Elkhart County. He's been a great leader in our community. He's been a wonderful asset to law enforcement and the idea of peace officer. To my knowledge, they have one of the best relationships with their community out of all the departments of law enforcement. And that's not to say we won't get into other departments of law enforcement. But I just want to point out that from my experience, my personal experience, they have one of the greatest relationships with the community. Brad has been a friend of mine and a colleague for a few years now, and we've worked together. He's come and spoke at my events. So it's going to be a pretty good conversation, as we know each other pretty well at this point. And I just want to kind of probe and find out, how has this position changed him, and what was his experiences, and maybe some regrets. But if any of you guys know Brad, he's always willing to sit down and have a conversation about whatever topic it is. And he's always very honest about his stance and his approach to it. So I think that's going to be another fascinating conversation that I wouldn't miss if I was you. I found it very humbling that he'd be willing to come on our podcast here and talk about this. So thanks, Brad, for that. And also, if you remember a while back, if you've been following our podcast for a while, you know that I went to Ann Arbor, Michigan, to a friend to kind of talk about free speech. And because we had audio and technical difficulties up there, we weren't able to use the footage. We're going to try to revisit that. And I don't know if it's going to be the 27th or the 29th, but I'll be sure to let you guys know. So maybe tomorrow, maybe Friday. But with my friend Bryan Michaels. Probably one of the smartest friends I have, well versed in knowledge and wisdom, He knows quite a bit about philosophy. He's somewhat of an historian. The guy is just an information tank. So it's always good to have people like that on who can maybe further explain things beyond what my scope may be or your scope may be, or maybe even give it a different perspective on historical events or what choices we need to make to brighten our future as far as our politics or the way that we treat each other as people. So I think Bryan is going to be a fascinating. I know when we tried it the last time, the conversation was great. I mean, we were getting along just fine with the conversation, and it was really intriguing. A lot of the points, which I'm going to revisit in that episode. So I hope you'll join us for that. Um, let's see. In our last show, we were set out to talk about enlightenment and humanism and atheism, and how those three forces kind of coalesce and how they came about. And though we hit a lot of really important topics there, I want to revisit that topic again. Um, I kind of feel like things were a little off key that night, but it's not to say that the conversation wasn't a great one. It just, we were talking about enlightenment, then we were talking about humanism, and then we said atheism, then we went back to humanism, and then enlightenment, and then suddenly we started talking about Me Too, which is a topic I really want to dig into because I feel very strongly about the position I stated there that night. And just to clarify, I was receiving some pushback during the conversation, which is great. But because my mind was still on enlightenment and humanism, there was a response that I wanted to make, and I'm sure Ryan will get a hold of me and let me know what he thinks about it too. But when I talked about the ability for a heterosexual male, I guess it doesn't even have to be heterosexual, but for a male to navigate today's um, Me Too movement climate, um, I mean, it's very, very difficult, I think, because the vehicle has moved so quick with Me Too and what sexual harassment is now defined as, and it's moved so quickly that we haven't had a chance to um, kind of reinvent the discourse that goes around that. So I think a lot of guys don't have the right tool set to navigate that area correctly, and I'm worried about a negative impact. I probably overstated the impact that night on the show, but I was just kind of trying to make a point using a little bit of a dramatic approach. But they said something that night about you know what we consider geeks or nerds in social status have had trouble, um, you know, getting women to have sex with them for decades. And while I agree with that, generally, I don't think that says anything about. I don't think it says anything about how it's that not being able to navigate this climate correctly as a male in this Me Too movement. I don't think that it makes it any easier for geeks. Actually, I think it just puts another layer there, so it makes it even harder for the types of people that Ryan was kind of talking about that night. So I don't think it kind of opens the floodgates for nerds and geeks to come in and try to get some ass. Basically, I just think that it just adds another layer for them as well. So maybe it disadvantages them even more. I think that's more of a likely possibility than, you know, because you have the chisel jaw um, perspective, I guess wanted perspective of a male. Um, I mean, it adds a layer for them too, but just because you have that element doesn't mean that it's going to get easier for geeks because these pretty boys, these handsome guys, popular guys, it's true it is getting harder for them, but as I said, at the same time, it gets harder for any male. I don't care what your social status is. You risk, it kind of feels like sometimes you may risk, and I'm a married guy, so I don't have to play that field, thankfully, but it feels like if you're talking about a single guy, that now he has a more implied risk on approaching females in any given social situation. I mean, I know several couples who are married and lasted for years and years and years that met at work and over flirtatious talk, and it produced a great relationship for them. So I just kind of want to revisit that point a little bit. Yeah, and hopefully we'll revisit the humanism, enlightenment, and atheism conversation, because there was a really great point that I think I was trying to make, is that humanism, I think, has always been a part of our altruistic selves, right? Even predating religion. And I kind of alluded to the fact that religion acted as a utility or as a vehicle to carry humanism in disguise. Because I mean, we hadn't necessarily given it that label yet, you know. So religion kind of was the vehicle to carry humanism to the Enlightenment. And once we came to the Enlightenment period, we decided that this moral sense had to have a label on it, right? And I think that's where we got humanism. So, yeah, so before the age of reason, I think humanism was still there, and I think it's something that all good people believe in. And most of the people I know are good people. Uh, so to think that because you belong to a religion that you're not a humanist, or that because humanism can be tied to atheism, that it's some bad idea from a theocratic perspective, but that it's an actual, I think it's innate. I'm no biologist by any means. Just it just kind of seems that way. There seems to be a pattern throughout time that we keep trying to be better to each other. So I'm gonna leave you on that. I hope you'll join us Friday, Saturday, and then Monday. Until then, I guess I will see you later.